for our upcoming test, Heredity, Organization of Life, and the Six Kingdoms. Share my screen here, and um, so I think you guys, we need a little bit of review on kind of what Mendel did, what his experiment was, and homozygous, heterozygous. You need to understand, what I'm saying with those words. They're big words, but they, realistically, they're fairly straightforward what they're talking about. But what Mendel figured out was that each flower had two sets of instructions for each trait or allele. Each feature that the flower had there was two sets of instructions, and we know from mitosis that we have multiples. We have two sets of instructions also, and so he was the one who kind of figured this out using these pea plants, and they were nice test subjects because they grew quickly. They had simple features, and so Mendel noticed, he was probably making observations, and he noticed that these flowers, there would be different outcomes, from kind of mixing and matching. When you pollinate different flowers together, you get different outcomes when you did this. And so he set up an experiment where he took two homozygous, and he would over and over again. You would get, when you would plant these pea plants with the white flowers, you would get white flowers. And so he knew that they were pure breeding white flowers. And all. So both of the two alleles, the two traits, were the same. And he also took, over and over again, the pea plants, the flowers were going to be purple flowers. And he knew that was going to be the case. Each time he planted the seeds from these purple flowers, he would get purple flowers. And so what he did was, in the first generation, he took the anther, the male part of the flower, and he cross-pollinated the other flower with the pollen from the other flower's anther. And in the first generation, he got all purple flowers. And so he then in the second generation, and we know now that meant what happened is you had one set of instructions that was from the white flower and one set of instructions that was from the purple flower, and they were combined. But the fact is that the purple flower was dominant, and its phenotype, would be expressed. It's how it looked would be expressed in the flower. And then the second part of the experiment was that he took the two, not when you have one from one flower, or one purple dominant and one recessive, that's called heterozygous. So he took the two, and then he let the second generation, he let the flower self-pollinate, the heterozygous flower pollinate. And the outcome from that one was that he had 3 purple flowers and 1 white flower. And so what happened was, and here is an example, this is one flower, or excuse me, the flowers, they were all self-pollinating flowers. And this Punnett square here shows you're going to have the BB, 2 dominants. You're going to have 1 pure dominant flower. You're going to have 2 heterozygous flowers. And then you're going to have 1 pure homozygous recessive flower in the second generation of the pea plant. And of course, 30 years went on, and no one really understood what he had done and figured out, but this is kind of the beginning of the understanding of how genetics works, and explains why you have the features that you do based upon the genetics that you received from your parents. If somebody, blue eyes are recessive, so if both of your parents have genetics for blue eyes, there's a possibility that you can get blue eyes. But if they don't, if one parent only has genetics for brown eyes, you're going to be receive. You're not going to have blue eyes, just based upon the fact that you need two copies in order to have a recessive trait be expressed in the offspring. So Mendel, I mean, the big concepts there is the homozygous and heterozygous. Homozygous meaning just both traits are the same. Heterozygous is the one trait is dominant, one trait is recessive. Homozygous can be recessive or dominant, so that's important to remember. Also mention the phenotype. The phenotype is what it looks like, and then genotype is just the genetics. And we've been talking about genetics and what that means. The concept we really haven't spent much time was incomplete dominance, and that was that the recessive trait is expressed with the dominant trait, and so the dominant trait it's incomplete. It doesn't quite dominate and take over what the phenotype or what it's going to look like. Kind of a real quick overview of what we did. Here, organization of life. Okay, this is the other part of the test that you guys are going to be getting. And this is just how life is organized, starting from the atom, the smallest particle of life that can't be broken down unless you're doing a nuclear experiment of some kind, or it can be broken down. But atoms combine to make molecules. Remember, molecules can be any two atoms that combine, and compound is any two atoms that are different from each other that combine. And here, this is adding macromolecule, which is just a combination of molecules combined together. And we didn't spend a lot of time talking about those. That's something we probably should kind of review some more before the end of the year. The molecules combine to make organelles, which are, remember, they're the little mini organs that inside of the cell, they kind of act like organs that do different functions, just like our organs do different functions in our bodies. The organelles they do functions that help the cell maintain its homeostasis, maintain itself. Then you have the cell itself here. The cell combines to make tissue. The tissue combines to make an organ. Then organ systems. You say something like the heart, the lungs would be a system. Another organ system would be the mouth, the throat, the esophagus, the small intestine, large intestine. Then you get into the actual organism itself. Okay, then you start to get populations of organisms. Different populations together becomes a community. When you add in the abiotic parts of an ecosystem, the parts that aren't alive, okay, and the biotic parts, you get an ecosystem. And this doesn't mention the biomes, but then when you add in different types of regions of the world that have similar amounts of moisture and similar temperatures, you get to the biome. So the desert would have very little water and high temperature. The tundra would have very low temperatures and also little water. Tropical rainforest would have moderate temperatures, constant temperatures, but lots of water. Where we are in temperate forests. We have a fluctuating temperature, lots of water. So you get the biomes of the Earth, and then the biosphere, where all living organisms live on Earth, going from the deep part of the Marianas Trench, the organisms that are down there, up to where the Ruppel's vulture flies above the savannas of Africa, 35 to 37,000 feet. They can rise in altitude to. That is where living organisms are on Earth. That is the biosphere. The last part of our test is going to be the kind of the six kingdoms. I've been telling you guys that the archaea were the first organisms to evolve, and I think there's a little bit of debate as far as whether it was bacteria or archaea. The big difference between archaea and bacteria is bacteria went on to evolve and evolved into cyanobacteria, which is the photosynthetic bacteria. Archaea just aren't really able to adjust and were never kind of adapted. They just maintain their existence as kind of living in very extreme environments, either near vents, the volcanic vents in the bottom of the oceans, doing their chemical, getting their energy from some of the chemical reactions that occur near those vents. But bacteria kind of are much more prolific and kind of exist in all different types of environments, including the kind of extreme ones. They still exist in those environments. They're prokaryotic. Archaea are both prokaryotic, and bacteria are prokaryotic. Bacteria can also be called eubacteria. Again, but they're prokaryotic, meaning they don't have these organelles, the well-defined organelles, that membrane-bound organelles. They don't have a nucleus. They have a cell wall. Their membranes, they really vary a lot in the different types of membranes, especially the archaea have different, their cell wall and membranes that they have are vary in the different types of compounds that they exist. So the and they are unicellular. That's really important. They don't create tissue or create multicellular organisms. The bacteria eventually kind of evolved into the eukaryotic bacteria, or protists. It's not bacteria. They evolved into protists, which is the eukaryotic, single cell eukaryotic organisms. And here they are in this kind of this cladogram. The protists are they can do photosynthesis. They can absorb nutrients. They can consume food. And again, all different types of eukaryotic protists exist, and they're very, very, very diverse. And this is one of the kingdoms right here, the protists. In addition, we just mentioned the archaea, again, the very ancient organisms that only live in extreme environments. The bacteria, again, they went on to really kind of evolved into many different, adapted to many different functions. And fungi, decomposers, they can only consume, they don't produce their own food. The funguses, the fungi, Animalia, okay, which is, again, fungi, Animalia, and the plants and protista are all eukaryotic. The archaea and bacteria are prokaryotic, and I can't stress that. It's very important to know the difference between the two. Plants, again, cell walls. They have a nucleus, membrane-bound organelles. all the eukaryotic have membrane-bound organelles, mitochondria. The plants have chloroplasts. They can do photosynthesis. Animals don't. They don't have the chloroplasts. Fungi don't have chloroplasts. At least I would say most. I'm sure there's exceptions, but they don't. They have mitochondria. They consume their food chemically. Protista, again, they vary. They have chloroplasts. They don't have chloroplasts. They have mitochondria, but they all have mitochondria. The protista do. And so that kind of gives you a sense of the 6 different kingdoms. Again, the big difference between the archaea and bacteria is that they're prokaryotic. All are one-celled, don't have a nucleus. They have cell walls, and they are standalone organisms. Which one evolved first, I just learned, is not really clear. Archaea, though, are very distinct, and they have not evolved at all. They're live in extreme conditions, can survive in extreme conditions. Bacteria can live in extreme conditions, but they have evolved into many different types of bacteria that are prevalent. We have trillions of bacteria that exist on us and help us in all different ways in our life, our lives. They're very important for our existence, whereas archaea are a little bit more limited in kind of their application and where they exist. And then again, the plants, animals, fungi, and protists, again, they all are eukaryotic. They all have nucleuses. Again, I'm repeating this just so you guys are, just make sure you're aware of this. Animals don't have the chloroplasts. Plants and animals have the mitochondria. So do the fungi, and the protists have the mitochondria. And that is a pretty good nutshell of what the 6 different kingdoms. And it's important that's how they differentiate the 6 different kingdoms. And again, they breaks down further into families and orders, and we're just focusing on the kingdoms right now. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a background for your the test that you're going to be receiving on this, and that is it.